Alright, so welcome back everybody. So for this video, I'm going to show you guys how to play Welcome to Pie Town. Welcome to Pie Town is basically sort of a worker placement game, and you'll be gathering food ingredients almost as if they were resources in order to bake pies and score victory points. Now, this is also sort of a deduction game of sorts as well, because each player will have a secret recipe. Each player gets one of these little boxes that will hold 3 ingredients that they chose at the beginning of the game that they were going to utilize for their secret recipe. Now, each secret recipe must have 2 different colored apples and 1 other type of fruit. Now, there are 3 different basically rare fruits that can be this star. It can be a banana, it can be a pumpkin, or it can be a strawberry. But these two have to be apples. But there are 3 different colored apples. There's red, there's green, and there's yellow. So each player is going to choose 2 of those apples and 1 other fruit of their choice as their secret recipe. And they'll put it into this box and keep it secret from the other players. Now, the other players also have secret recipes, but you're going to be trying to deduce what secret ingredients that your opponents are using for their secret recipe. Because at the end of the game, if you can deduce what secret ingredients they used for their secret recipe during the game, then you'll get extra victory points that way. You won't get very many, but you'll get a few, and it might just even the odds. So that's why you might want to make sure you try to keep this secret as much as you possibly can. But as we try to keep this secret, there are ways that your opponents can spy on you and even figure out what ingredients you're using. There are ways. And so we will talk about how to play this game in more detail starting now. So, first of all, let's just kind of briefly go over how you're going to score victory points. One of the ways you're going to score victory points is your kitchen currently has this little chef hat at the 1 victory point location. So every time you bake a pie, you'll score 1 victory point. If you want to increase that, then you're going to need to upgrade your kitchen, and we'll talk about how you'll upgrade your kitchen. But when you upgrade your kitchen, you're going to get 2 victory points every time you bake a pie. Now, you're probably thinking, that's not a lot of victory points. And you're right, that isn't a lot of victory points. And so there is a major way to score victory points in this game, and that is selling the pies that you make. Now, let's just use some pies as equations. So let's say we had some pies out already made by me and a potential other player, you know, something like maybe this, okay, something like that. When you place a worker / dice, your workers are these dice, okay? So when you place them here, you could place one, for instance, right here to sell all of the pies in a column. So if I was the green player and I chose this column, I'd get 4 extra points for every pie that's in that column, okay? Now, if I went to this location to sell the bottom row, I could also do that, and I could sell my green pies for 7 victory points altogether. But you see, there's also my opponent's pies in this row as well. And so if I was to go here, my opponent would automatically get the victory points for their pies because it would be all the pies sold in the row. So I'd be helping them out score points without them lifting a finger basically to get victory points. And they would get 9 victory points. So that's the main way you're going to score victory points. Now you'll notice that each of these columns give off different victory points. If you use a pie of 3 of the different apples, and it's just the 3 apples, then you have to put it in that column, okay? And there's a limit to how many pies can be in here, so at some point you're gonna have to sell your pies because otherwise you won't be able to bake anymore because there won't be any more room in the market. But obviously you can only put the pies that have just the 3 apples in the ingredients. So basically just an actual apple pie can only go in this column. Then this column here must be 2 apples of a certain color, and it can be any color really, plus 1 of the rare fruit. Like I said, pumpkin, banana, strawberry. Those can go in that column. If you bake a pie using 2 of the rare ingredients, meaning it could be 2 pumpkins, or it could be a pumpkin and a banana, for instance, plus 1 of the different apples, 1 of the 3 apples. If you use those 3 ingredients in that order, then the pie will go here. And then this is restricted to the secret recipe. Each player has a secret recipe that they can put here to score extra victory points. So obviously you're going to want to create you're going to want to bake as many pies as you can that are your secret recipe pie here as you can in this column, because you're going to score more victory points that way. But if you were to just simply bake 1 pie that was your secret recipe pie and you put it right here, well, your opponents are going to see the ingredients you're using to bake that pie, and they're going to immediately deduce what secret recipe you are making. So if you decide to make a secret recipe pie, you're going to need to be able to bake 2 pies at the same time. Then it would be much harder for them to deduce what ingredients you're using for your secret recipe, because then you'd be showing them a handful of ingredients. Like, for instance, let's just say you were using all of these ingredients here. Well, now they're going to have a harder time figuring out which of these were used to bake that pie. And you might even, when you pick them up and put them down so that way everyone knows you're using the certain amount of ingredients you need for a pie, you might want to kind of mix them around in your hands and then put them down so everyone can see them. So that way they don't think that you got, 3 exactly next to each other. They might think, oh, those 3 next to each other could potentially be that secret recipe that he's making or she's making. So that's something you're going to want to make sure you do. Now, here's the thing. Since you are restricted to just a particular secret recipe, and your opponents are also restricted to that recipe, your opponents can bake your secret recipe, because if they figure out the exact 3 ingredients you're using, if they figure it out, they can say, hey, is this the 3 ingredients you're using? And they can secretly show you the 3 ingredients. So, I don't know. Let's just say it was this. So they could secretly show you, let's take that one out, and say, hey, are you baking a pie with these 3 secret ingredients? And of course, your opponent has to tell you the truth if they're, using these ingredients or not in their pie. If even one of them is wrong, they don't need to say which one is wrong. But if even one of these ingredients is wrong, and they were going to use these ingredients to bake a pie in the secret pie recipe, they actually lose the ingredients. Bye-bye. That means they don't get to make the pie. So that is the risk of stating and deducing and using their ingredients basically to make your pie. So that's the risk. It's a big gamble. Unless you know for sure, it's not recommended you do that. Unless you know for absolutely sure what ingredients they're using. Now, there are ways to deduce, not simply deduce, but there are ways to actually figure it out. So let's say my opponent, they had a dice here on this location, okay? And they had taken this action and they had put the dice there. And they had obviously gone to market and they had gotten their victory points and all that awesome stuff, okay? If I have a dice that's in the break room that's a higher number, if I was to put it on top of the die, it's considered spying. If I'm spying, I can look at my opponent's box, or not my opponent's box, but I can randomly look at one of their ingredients. So like, for instance, I could just randomly take out an ingredient from their box. Because, so if it was like, for instance, that my green dice was a 3 instead of a 2, I could look at 2, for instance. If it was 3 numbers higher, I could look at 3 ingredients, for instance. But if it was just a 2 over the 1, I could secretly spy on one ingredient and look at it secretly and then put it back into the box, knowing one ingredient that is in their secret recipe, okay? But my opponent doesn't even know which one I looked at. So they're not allowed to, your opponent, even though it's their secret recipe, they're not allowed to look at the one that you took from the box to secretly look at. So they don't even know which one you looked at, and so they have no way of fixing that for sure. They might still be able to fix it in some way, shape, or form, and there is a way to do it, and we'll talk about it. But chances are there's a good chance that they don't know which one they looked at. So, but there is ways to mitigate that. So spying is completely allowed, and you can do spying on the market and the orchard, and we'll talk about the orchard later. But you can spy on your opponent's secret recipe by putting your dice on top of their location, either at market or the orchard. Now, if you put it at this location like that, it's basically like you're taking the actual action. So if there was, for instance, pies in this column, and I put the dice on top of it, I could sell the pies and receive the benefits, okay? That's allowed. Also, that's the same thing goes for the orchard. I can receive the normal bonuses if I was taking the normal action with the orchard, and we'll talk about how that would work in a moment. But that's also allowed. So basically, not only are you potentially spying on your opponent to figure out what their secret recipe is, but you're still potentially taking the action for the bonuses as well. You don't have to. That's not a have to. It's just a bonus that you may do if you want to spy on your opponent. Okay? Now, whenever you sell pies at market, something else will happen. You'll gain your victory points, and you'll also draw 2 ingredients from the bag. Okay? You'll draw 2 ingredients from the bag. So you get a couple of ingredients plus victory points whenever you bake pies at market. Pretty cool, pretty cool. Okay, so let's talk about the actions and how to score. Not how to score, but how to use the actions on your turn and what they do and all that. Okay? Let's talk about that next. So let's move the camera so we can see everything a little clearer. Okay, so one thing that always happens, first of all, is you have these 2 dice that are in your break room. You start with 1 on the 3, and you start with 1 on the 2, okay? And these, which aren't in the break room, they will always start outside off of your player board, and they will always have a value of 1. Now, some of these actions require you to basically have a certain number, a certain level number, because, well, let's just explain this. So you'll notice here we have this action called higher. You'll notice it has a dice and a -2 on it. So if I was to put a 2 here, I wouldn't be able to do it because this is going to drop the number after the round is over. It's going to drop the number to 0. But as you know, dice don't have 0 on them usually, and these dice are no exception to that rule. 1 is the lowest number that you can go on this dice. So this 2, for instance, could not be placed at this location because it can't be placed to 0. That means that if I was to place this dice on the higher location, at the end of the round, it would lose its levels and it would go down to level 1. So that means next round, I'm going to have to figure out a way to get that number increased, or my actions are limited by that number. So that's something to note. Now, let's talk about, first of all, let's talk about the upgrade action. So the upgrade action has the same thing, except it's only a -1. So you could still place your 2 at this location, and it would just turn it into a 1 at the end of the round. What does upgrade do, though? Well, upgrade allows you to either upgrade your storage, your kitchen, or your baking area. Let's talk about the kitchen first. If you choose to use this upgrade action to upgrade your kitchen, you'll simply move this to this location here, this Chef Hut or Chef Hat token. That means whenever you bake a pie, instead of receiving 1 victory point, you'll receive 2 victory points every time you bake a pie. So that's all that does if you choose to upgrade the kitchen. If you choose to upgrade the storage, then you get to move this apple token to the 14. This means the amount of basically ingredients your storage can handle. Normally, you can only handle 8 ingredients at most. But if you upgrade it one time, none of these can be upgraded more than twice. They can only be upgraded each once. But if it's been upgraded, you can hold 14 ingredients, which is nice. So that's another good one. Obviously, these are probably the 2 main ones you're going to want to upgrade the most, especially the kitchen, so you can get more victory points. And then the third one that you can upgrade is basically your baking action. If you upgrade the baking action, you can take off the lock token off of that location, which means that you'll be able to take the bake action more than once per round. Okay? That's what that does. So normally you'd only be able to do it if the lock was here. You would only be able to do it 1 time per round. But if you had it unlocked, you could do it twice per round instead. That's what that's going to do if you decide to upgrade. Once you've upgraded everything, then there's no need to even go to this location to upgrade because they can only be upgraded once each. Now, these aren't action locations. These 3 locations aren't considered action locations. Only the upgrade is, only the bake is, the hire is, the market is, the orchard over there is, and the pie convention is as well. Those are the only places you can place out your workers, okay? Now, the hire location, if you were to place your dice on the hire location, then I would obviously have to put at least a 3 here. And then what it does is it basically hires another worker. So now you'd get to place another worker dice at the higher location. At the end of the round is when you'd get to use it. So at the end of the round, you'd finally get to basically take all your workers back. So this would become a 1. I'd get this, which is still a 1. And this would also, for instance, become a 1. So now, even though I've got 3 workers, I'd be limited to what I can do with the actions. I could bake a pie, because it would basically turn the 1 into a 2, so that's something at least, right? I could potentially bake a pie, and even this equation here would still allow me to bake at least 1 pie up there, right? So that's something that could potentially happen that I could do. But one of the other ways you're going to increase the levels is at the orchard. So let's go to the orchard, and let's see if I can just bring the orchard to us instead. Let's move this out of the way. Okay, here's the orchard. Now, this is another action location you can go to. You can go to any one of these dice spots, okay, of your choice. And you'll notice there's, random fruit here in the orchard in each of the hexes. There's 2 in each, and it's kind of random. Now, if I was to place a dice at this location, since it's a 1, I'd only be able to take 1 ingredient from one of the hexes that it's adjacent to. However, if, for instance, you had a higher number, you could take that exact number. So if it was a 3, you could take 3 ingredients. So even if it was, potentially more, like, I don't know, a 6 maybe, you could take 6 ingredients if there was 6 to take, which could potentially be the case because there's 2 here, there's 2 here, and there's 2 here, and that's what it's adjacent to. So you could take 6 ingredients. But of course, you'd also have to have room for that 6 ingredients. Remember, you only start with 8 max. So this would have to be upgraded, and that's assuming you didn't already have a ton of ingredients. But yes, you could take a lot of ingredients. And then it's +1. So whatever number is placed here, it's going to be +1. So then this would become a 2. So that's another way you're going to increase the numbers on your dice, the levels of your dice, so that way you can do more stuff. But it's also the main way you're going to get ingredients is here at the orchard. Now remember, your opponents can spy on you. So if you place a lower dice here and your opponent places a higher dice at the same location on top of your dice, that means that they get to look at two of your ingredients, two of your secret ingredients, and they now know which two of them are. And so maybe they can deduce what the third one is and take the risk and use that to their advantage to create a secret recipe in the secret recipe spot using your secret recipe. Of course, they can just hold on to that information and save it for later to score extra victory points during the final phase of the game. Up to them. Now, how are you going to keep track of all this stuff? Each player is given this like picture of basically who they are at the at this Pie Town location. So if you're green, this is what you look like. And so on the other side, we have something where you can write on. We have a dry erase marker you can utilize, and you can basically, for instance, okay, my opponent Sam is going to go here. My opponent Santiago is going to go there. My opponent Brandon, he's going to go there, for instance. And you just write their names here and, you know, dry it off later. And then you can, like, if you've figured out some of the ingredients, you can circle them, for instance, thinking, I think it's this ingredient, and I think it's this ingredient here, for instance. So you can kind of keep track of all of your opponent's secret ingredients that way. Of course, this can change as well because there is a way for your opponents to change their secret ingredients even. So let's talk about the next action location that you can utilize that we haven't really talked about all that much. So one of the other locations that you can go to is this here. So let's bring it closer up so we can see it better. So it's this board is obviously where you're keeping track of your score. And if you ever reach more than 50 points or 50 points or more, then you're going to get one of these. So you just keep going around the board. But this is also where we keep track of how many rounds there are in the game. There's 9 rounds. And then after the 9th round, there's a final bake-off. And we'll get to the bake-off last. But if you ever place a dice here at the Pie Convention, you can assign a new starting player as one of your choices. And if you do that, so if I was to place this one here and wanted to assign the new starting player, because at the beginning of the game, the person will go, the same person will go, one person will go first at the beginning of the first round. And if no one ever comes here to the Pie Convention to change the starting player, then clockwise order, then the player who was going second in the first round will be first, just like in most games. But here, you can be like, I'm number 4, I'm the 4th player, and I want to go first this round. So you could assign yourself to be the first player by just simply placing a dice here. And then you get rewarded by leveling up your dice if you decide to place your dice here at the Pie Convention to do this particular action. However, if you do this particular action, you're going to need a higher number because it's going to deduct one of your levels. So you're going to need something like that. And if you decide to go here, you can actually change one of the ingredients of your secret recipe. So now you're thinking your opponents are getting close to discovering what your secret recipe is. So now you can secretly exchange one of the ingredients in your secret recipe for another one of your choice. Isn't that nice? So there are ways to obviously mitigate your opponents finding out your secret recipe. But yes, that's basically all of the different actions that you can take in the game. You can go to the market and sell your pies. Of course, you'll need to bake pies first. You'll need to send a dice worker here to bake the pies to place them on the market board. But then later on, you can sell your pies at the market, placing workers there. You can upgrade your kitchen and your storage and your bake. At that action location, you can hire more workers, meaning you'll only be able to ever hire up to 2 anyway, but you can hire some more workers so you have more actions during each round. You can go to that orchard and get ingredients that way. You can sell your pies, obviously, to get victory points that way, a lot of victory points that way. Plus, obviously, you can also get a couple of ingredients when you sell some pies, which is nice. You can obviously go to the pie convention and change the starting player or change a secret ingredient in your secret recipe box. And then there's one other thing that happens at the end of the game, the final bake-off, okay? At the final bake-off, each player can choose to basically secretly tell the other player what I think your recipe is. So, for instance, I could say that player 2 was using a green apple, he was using a banana, and he was using a yellow apple. And I can say to player 2, was this what you used for your secret recipe? Now, they will have to tell you which ones they used, obviously. If all of these are incorrect, if all 3 are incorrect, you lose 2 points. So that's the risk at the end of the game. That means if you got player 2's incorrect, player 3's incorrect, and player 4's incorrect as well, you could lose 2, 4, 6 points. Okay, so you're going to lose some points if you get them all wrong. If you decide to not guess a particular player's ingredients, then you just don't get any points. Oh well. If you get only one correct, so let's just say the green apple was the only one that was correct, you get 0 points still. If you get 2 correct, so if these 2 were correct but this was wrong, then I would score 3 points for getting, is it 3 points? It might be 2. Let me look that up. It's 2 points. So if you get 2 ingredients right, it's 2 points. So you get 2 out of 3 of the ingredients right, you get 2 victory points. If you get them all correct, so if these were the secret ingredients that player Sam was using, then I get 4 victory points for guessing all 3 right. That's a lot of victory points. If you got all of them right, that's 4, 8, 12 victory points. That could easily change the equation of who's going to win the game. But basically, that's how you play Pie Town. So if you guys liked this video, don't forget to leave me a like, and I'll see you guys again next time. Bye.